A biblical perspective on life, culture and current events. This is 2020 on Vision.
On a Wednesday, we like to get an update on those things that are happening in Israel, more broadly across the Middle East too. Mandy, Worby, across a lot of detail that so many of us take for granted. And Mandy puts a lot of time into getting these updates together, and she's back with us. Hey, Mandy, welcome back.
Hi, how are you today?
I'm doing good.
Excellent.
Do you know what? There's a lot of water under the bridge, isn't there, since last week? And my goodness.
Wow, the speed at which things are just progressing. It's unreal.
Yes. Yeah. Well, huge celebrations around the world. I might even say some people have been traditional enemies of Israel or critics in the worst form. They have also celebrated the release of the living hostages.
Yes.
How were you feeling when those first hostages, the images began to appear?
I watched most of the events live as they were happening in the afternoon on Monday. There was a live feed inside Gaza showing Hamas getting themselves organised. No elaborate ceremonies this time. Those disgusting displays, they were told in no uncertain terms, don't you dare do anything so appalling. And of course, there was live feeds all over Israel. The hostages were returned in two groups, 7 in the first group, 13 in the second group. I watched as the Red Cross vehicles, convoys, drove through Gaza to the IDF stations where they were handed to the... I tell you, I get so emotional just thinking about it. The looks on their faces, Neil. Finally having a friendly, welcoming face and a hug and comfort and water and food. Some of them had their family members with them as they got onto the helicopters to fly from Gaza into Israel, where they flew to different bases. And everywhere that they went, there were Israelis lining the streets. They were out in force in the neighbourhoods. They were out the front of army bases. They were gathered at hospitals. There were tens of thousands in Hostage Square in Tel Aviv. And as the hostages were being lifted and taken to different hospitals around the country, they would fly over. Some of them flew over Hostage Square in Tel Aviv. And the crowds knew that they were hostages above them, and the crowds just went nuts, and the hostages could see the crowds gathered for them. It was like unreal. The reunions between many of their families. I tell you, I cried so much on Monday, and I cry every day, every time I see a new reunion video. Some of the families, the built-up stress of 2 years of knowing the horrors that their sons and husbands and brothers and that were experiencing. And suddenly they were there in their arms again, and they just lost it, Neil. It was just unbelievable.
Yep.
It was really amazing.
We're talking 2 years hostage captivity, held underground in tunnels, and I think sometimes above ground too, but mostly I think underground, some of them in real isolation. Yeah. What have you been able to glean about the condition of the hostages? Because they've gone through a really
have. But I've got to tell you what was really horrifying. News outlets all over the world have been covering this, but a CNN reporter, Christiane Amanpour, she actually made the claim that the Israeli hostages were probably being better treated than the average Gazan. And she had to quickly apologise and walk that back. What an appalling thing to say. While the hostages managed to walk out of Gaza, so to speak, at least they could walk, they were all unbelievably thin, dangerously so. Like, they have lost between 30 and 40% of their body weight. Most of them are pasty white. They've not seen daylight. They've been literally underground in tunnels for 2 years, most of them, not all of them, and many of, even the ones that weren't, have been underground for much of the last 2 years, just not completely so. The physical abuses, the deliberate starvation, they were chained to walls, no proper sanitation, no proper medical treatment. Some of the hostages were kept together, but some were completely isolated from everybody. They were literally alone for 2 years, chained to a wall in a tunnel. And the doctors in Israel were saying when the hostages come out, we're going to have to be very careful about the amount of food and the quality of food that we give them. It has to be done slowly, because their bodies will just revolt. They will just not cope with too much food. So knowing that the release was coming up, Hamas began force feeding them. Now they've got other issues that they're physically having to deal with, a lot of ongoing pain, because their bodies were suddenly inundated with food and they couldn't cope with it. The cruelty has been unimaginable. And over time, of course, then they're going to have to deal with not just the physical healing, but also the psychological abuses as well. They've said that even right up to minutes before they were to be put into the Red Cross vehicles, Hamas were saying, oh no, the deal's off, it's all been changed and you're not going home. And so one of the hostages said that while he was in the tunnels, Hamas would say that Israel had given up on him. Hamas was about to conquer Israel. They were planning another October 7. So there's immediate relief for them right now. But in the days, weeks, months, years, Neil, the consequences that they have to live with and the treatment that they're going to need, physical as well. I mean, some of them had injuries that weren't treated. Others had injuries that were treated by doctors, but procedures were done on them with no anaesthesia, which has resulted in other injuries. So, I mean, the mind boggles at what these people have gone through.
You know, we've got to focus on the living hostages. They've got a long recovery ahead. There is national celebration in Israel. In fact, around the world, people celebrating the release of those hostages, some saying, why did it take 2 full years for that to happen? But what about the hostages who died in captivity? And there's still something like 24 deceased.
There was 28 deceased, and there was 48 hostages. 20 of them were alive. 28 deceased. 4 were returned home on the day they were supposed to. They were all supposed to be returned home on Monday. 4 have returned home. They have gone to a forensic facility for DNA testing. Remember Shiri Bibas, the mother who was killed with her 2 babies? An unknown woman was put in her coffin and sent to Israel. So she was eventually returned, but this is just trauma upon trauma. So they're making sure that the 4 that have been released are actually Israelis. But that was a complete breach of the ceasefire deal. The other 24 are still in there, and Hamas broke the deal on day one. Now, President Trump has basically said, he put on Truth Social, he said all 20 hostages are back and feeling as good as can be expected. A big burden has been lifted, but the job is not done. The dead have not been returned as promised. Phase 2 begins right now.
Okay, phase 2 of the deal.
Yep.
It's a 3-phase deal. Phase 1, largely, yes, tick the box, almost there.
Half the hostages,
yep. So what does phase 2 look like?
Okay, this basically is about disarming Hamas, but Hamas spokesman Hazem Qassem, he said on Monday that Hamas has no need to abide by every word of the Trump 20-point peace plan, including calls for the terrorist group to lay down its arms. He said this, quote, "We do not need to limit ourselves to the Israeli terms and definitions related to the weapons. We will not be captives to Israeli terms or demands. This is one of the focal points of the struggle in the next stage after cessation of aggression in the Gaza Strip." He went on to repeat the long-standing Hamas position that it will neither give up its weapons or cede governance of the Strip until a Palestinian statehood has been laid out. However, Hamas, have already admitted that they will never accept a 2-state solution. It's a Palestinian state with no Jewish state at all, which means they will never disarm because Israel's not going to voluntarily just destroy itself. Then there's another Hamas leader, Khalil al-Hayya. He was part of the Cairo negotiations, and he said this, quote, "The countdown to the next massacre has begun. Next time we will slaughter all the Jews." So how do you negotiate with that or live beside that? You can't. And then on the topic of retaining power in Gaza, Hamas has begun this reign of terror. They are now attacking rival clans. They're killing others that they have just accused of being collaborators. They're murdering them, dragging them through the streets. This has been the actual physical treatment of Gazans by Hamas since they took over in 2007. And this is how they instill fear and retain power.
And with Donald Trump in the mix, America using muscle in all of this, and he's touted as a real hero in all of the things that have happened here. But how has President Trump responded to the attitude of Hamas?
Well, he has basically said, he's back in the US now. It was a really quick trip to the Middle East. Israel and Egypt signed the deal. But he's back in the US now. He was visiting now with President of Argentina, Javier Milei. And at a press conference, he was asked, what do you think about Hamas' refusal to disarm? He said, if they don't, quote, by the way, if they don't disarm, we will disarm them, and it will happen quickly and perhaps violently, but they will disarm. I mean, they've broken the ceasefire already. As a result, Israel has now delayed opening the Rafah crossing, and they've suspended aid entry as well.
What have you gleaned about what's happening within the bounds of Gaza? How are people responding to the deal? The locals,
you mean?
Yeah.
The locals? Well, obviously they're relieved. They're glad that the fighting is over. They're glad that all that has ended. But now that the pressure is off, now they're expressing what they really think and feel. And immediately after the first group of hostages returned, there was videos of Gazans filming themselves dancing in the streets and singing. And this is all ages, including children. One of the songs that they're singing, some of the lyrics are Khaybar, Khaybar, Ya Yahud. Now that is, I'm not going to read all of the lyrics because it's just nasty in English, but it's basically an ancient Arabic call to murder the Jews. Okay, it comes from a quote that goes back to the Battle of Khaybar in 628 AD, and it was a rallying slogan of that battle when Muhammad led a large army of Muslims to the oasis of Khaybar in Saudi Arabia. That's where a Jewish community was established, and they slaughtered 93 Jews. So they're calling for the slaughter of more Jews. This is the average Gazan in the street. Right now, there is a new cafe that's just opened up in Khan Yunis. It's overlooking the beach. It's a lovely little spot, and they've called it the Nova Restaurant and Cafe. It's named in celebration of the slaughter of 378 Jews at the music festival on October 7. I mean, I showed you pictures of Gazan children, 3 little boys, 1 little girl, between the ages of, I'm guessing, about 5 and 9. The boys wearing green headbands and Hamas flags draped over them, carrying machine guns. The little girl's on a woman's shoulder. She's carrying a machine gun wrapped in the terrorist keffiyeh scarf. They're making the hand gestures for Hamas. And I've got to tell you, Neil, it's very hard to have hope for future generations in Gaza if they continue to be trained from the day they're born to live for jihad. I don't know the answer to that.
And that's something, a part of a lot of Islamic nations where there's Sharia law and there's these things. Children are indoctrinated from very early ages.
Yes.
Hey, let's talk about the numbers of people who have been killed in Gaza, because it's been a huge concern. And maybe there needs to be someone, right-sizing numbers and things here. Yeah. There's been some release out of Donald Trump's office. What are the new numbers looking like?
Well, right from the very beginning of the war, Israel said that the numbers being claimed by Hamas were wrong. But the figures that President Trump has, and if anybody's got the correct figures, you can bet your bottom dollar that the man in the White House has got the accurate figures. He's revealed it, and it's astounding. There was an article published on October 11. It was about a press conference with President Trump where he said Hamas has lost 58,000 people. That was a quote. Okay, so the Hamas-run health ministry says that the death toll in Gaza is over 67,000 since October 7, but Hamas never differentiate between civilians and combatants. They never differentiate between, say, deaths from the war and naturally occurring deaths from, say, heart attack, diabetes, accidents, old age, that sort of thing. They have labelled every single death as a civilian death at Israeli hands. But the capacity of the IDF to protect civilians is, can I just tell you, it's breathtaking. Let's just put it this way. If hypothetically 67,000 deaths is accurate, it's probably not, but let's just say it is. If 58,000 of those 67,000 are Hamas members, that means the civilian death count is 9,000. That is an 86% ratio, the lowest proportion of civilian casualties in war history. And the ratio of militants to civilian deaths is roughly 6.4 to 1. That is unprecedented in urban warfare.
Well, a lot of people will not be easily convinced around figures, crunching numbers and things like that. Hey, what's next, do you think, Mandy Worby?
Oh, Neil, I don't know. The deal is signed. Very wealthy Muslim oil-rich nations are planning to rebuild Gaza. That's the promise. Who's going to govern Gaza? I don't know. There are many saying that Mahmoud Abbas of the PLA, should do it, but Israel has said absolutely not. The man pays terrorist families in perpetuity because they killed Jews. The Palestinian people themselves hate Mahmoud Abbas and the PLO. They actually favour Hamas, especially in Judea and Samarian towns where the PLO governs. So Ben Shapiro, he reckons that Hamas have got something up their sleeve. The problem is that Hamas are untrustworthy. They say they will do something and then they don't. At the moment, Israel has control of 53% of the Strip for security purposes for the time being. But I don't know. I don't know, Neil. All I would simply ask people to do is pray that the deal succeeds. And of course, just like Psalm 122 says, please pray for the peace of Jerusalem.
We mention that regularly on this segment because praying for the peace of Jerusalem is the same as praying for the peace of the world.
Yes,
and we've seen the way that actually works in practice. And this might be a very good day that we're celebrating the release of those hostages. It might not all be complete yet because there are the remains of those who've died in captivity.
Yeah.
But Mandy, always appreciate your update and your insights, your passion for the people of Israel, and really love your thoughts once again today on 2020.
Pleasure.
Thanks for taking time to listen to this audio on demand from Vision Christian Media. To find out more about us, go to vision.org.au.